Now, let's talk about the process of tasting. Let's talk about some of the techniques of tasting. Then you look in your manual, we've got a practice tasting set up for you, and this is how it should look. Tasting is the first step to understanding spirits. It's also the first step to making great cocktails. First of all, understand it's a sensory evaluation. We're going to look, we're going to smell, we're going to taste. Think about the tasting process the same way that you think about eating food. In your bars and restaurants, from now on, think about the way you talk about spirits and wine the same way you talk about food. Use words like cherries and grapefruits and melons. Use words like velvety and soft and rich and light and full-bodied. Use words that make sense to people. Textural and flavorful. That's all you got to think about. Flavors and textures. Because really, that's what this all breaks down to. As a sensory evaluation, our first step will be to look at it. The next step will be to smell it. And I want everybody to just rub your tongue against the roof of your mouth right now. Way in the back of your mouth, at the base of your schnoz, there's a soft thing back there. Do you feel it? Okay, that is your soft palate. We were taught years ago that our taste buds is where we taste. And we do. There's no question about it. Our taste buds is where we taste textural things. Sweet, salty, sour, bitter. We say that those are the flavors that we know. Sweet, salty, sour, bitter. And of course, if you know, there's a fifth flavor now called umami. And then, if you're a sake taster like we are, then you know that the Japanese have a sixth flavor they call astringency. Sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, and astringency are the things that we feel in our mouth. But in actuality, what we think of as flavors are really aromatics. Okay? Fruits and nuts and flowers and things. And those we do through our nose. So our nose becomes incredibly important to us. When you breathe in through your nose, aromatic compounds, that's a nice technical word for smells, pass across your palate, along with other things like, David mentioned congeners earlier, and we're going to use a lot of words for these things. They pass across your palate. The palate is the only organ in your entire body that's connected directly to your brain. So the deal here in tasting is to be able to step in between the aromatics and the textures and separate them. So let's break down each one of the steps now and take you through it. Because what I'd like you to do first is look at the entire color spectrum of spirits. We talk about white goods. Those are the spirits that have not seen any oak aging. We talk about the brown goods that you have on the backside here, spirits that have seen oak aging, or that is how they get their color, is it not?
Well, that's usually how they get their color. Maybe a little visit from the caramel salesman, but most of the time it really is coming out of time in oak.
But I think the important thing to consider is that spirits do not change color from oxidation the way wine would. And as we talk about, say, wines turning golden from being exposed to oxidation, spirits don't do that. Spirits will only change color if we influence them either by oak or by coloring. So these are, in this case, of course, premium spirits, so they are all oak-aged spirits. And let's begin with the simple looking process. And all we would want you to do is take glass number 1. And this is not a blind tasting. We urge you to get to the point where perhaps a friend or a colleague is setting up a blind tasting for you, and you're taking this category maybe and doing 5 or 6 of them and learning to recognize styles. But for the beginning, let's just put the glass down and look at it this way. Look straight down from the top of the glass. Look at the sides of the glass. And what I want you to see here is that the spirit is basically a silver or platinum color. It's the color of water because it's seen no oak aging. It's a white spirit. And if you look at the 4 white spirits side by side, most of them basically are this kind of color of water. And yet, if you look closely, you'll see there's a color gradation, if you will. They vary from spirit to spirit based upon the type of distillation and the quality of distillation. Now, we'll measure the quality of distillation in the nose, no question, and in the mouth. But you can get indications already. And the next step is to do just as my colleague Doug is doing. Give that glass a little swirl around, and let's see what's going on in the sides of the glass. You might call them legs, call them tiers, call them columns. I don't care what you call them as long as you don't call them quality. Thanks. The legs, the tiers, the columns really mean just a couple of things to us. In a white spirit, they mean either alcohol or sugar. And in the case of spirit number 1 being a London dry gin, you can be sure there's no sweetening agent in here. So what you're getting are alcohol tiers. We're getting a bit of evaporation, if you will, and the alcohol is moving down the side of the glass. Now, why do I need to know this? Well, in a comparative tasting, when I'm comparing perhaps, say, the category of gin, I'll see a difference in the tiers. When I'm comparing a gin to, say, a vodka or a tequila, I will see a difference in the way the tears manifest themselves. We don't learn a lot about looking at spirits the same way we do looking at wine. Where we really learn about spirits is in the nose. What we need to do now is smell. Because smelling is where we get all these aromatics. Smelling is where we get all these flavors. And what I don't want you to do is take that glass and stick your schnoz in there and take a good snort off of it. Because this is strong. This is not wine. So what I want you to do is hold the glass like this. And we're going to look for primary aromatics. Okay? And to do that, we're going to wave it in front of our nose like this. Gently. If a spirit is really well distilled, I don't care what you put on top of it, it's just going to push those smells forward. This is why great distillates in oak are better than average distillates in oak. You can barrel out a lot of stuff, but you can't change the quality of the distillation at the beginning. The next step is what's going to make your tasting life change. And that is basically how we put it in our mouth. Now, the first step is this. We talked about sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, astringency. We measure those on our tongue. We feel them on our tongue. Let's break them down. Sweetness. Where do you taste sweetness? Does anybody know? Right on the tip of your tongue. All right? Where does alcohol come from? So where do you think you taste alcohol in your mouth? We want to taste the flavors. So we're going to move the spirit past the tip of our tongue into the middle of our mouth. Then we're going to let it fall off the sides of our tongue. Okay? We're going to fill our mouth. We're going to roll it around in our mouth. We're going to chew it up, and we're going to spit it right out. And the reason we're doing that is, quite frankly, right now, every single thing that you've eaten, maybe you had a cigarette during the break, maybe you grabbed a cup of coffee, maybe you had a ham sandwich. I don't really care what you've done, but whatever's in there, it's affecting the way that you taste, and you could all use a little bit of mouthwash right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to rinse our mouth out with every single spirit that we taste for the rest of the week. Every time you taste a spirit, you will taste it twice. Period. Okay? This you have to do. You'll take a little tiny sip, you'll rinse your mouth out, and you'll spit it out. What have you done? It's like putting olive oil on the inside of a salad bowl. You have just prepared your mouth for tasting. Okay? Now the only thing that's in there will be that spirit. But there's more than that. The second time that you take it in, you're going to treat it completely differently. You're going to take a little sip in, you're going to drop it in the middle of your tongue. This time you're going to let it fall off the sides of your tongue. You're going to push it up behind your teeth. You're going to roll it over your lips. You're going to completely coat every single molecule of your mouth. And then you're going to hold it in your mouth with your lips closed, and you're going to breathe out through your nose. Why am I doing this? Because your palate is on the inside of your mouth. And as good as you think you might be doing this, after teaching this for nearly 30 years, what I realize is that even today, I'm still better in here than I am out here. When you breathe out, you're doing what your mouth has been doing for your whole life. From the time you started eating, you took a bite of food, you chewed it, you swallowed it, you said, I like it or I don't. Well, what you did is while you were chewing it, you were breathing through your nose. So you're pushing these aromatics against your palate. So if you try that food technique here, put it in your mouth, roll it, breathe out through your nose, all these aromatics will explode. Then after you spit it out, what we're going to do is take those aromatics and compare them to what's happening on your tongue. I want you to close your eyes.
Okay.
I want you to purse your lips. Very softly, very gently breathe in through your mouth and out through your nose.
Now, it should cool off, and I think it does cool off because nobody coughed, you know. Seriously, there are moments when you breathe in, and there'll be some spirits when it's like putting the bellows on it.
Well, and how about this?
Almost immediate. Green apple,
you feel that cool
lemon.
mentholatum thing on the tip of your tongue? Yep. That is great distillation.
It's like spearmint even?
Yeah. Well, contrary to what you may have been taught, alcohol is not supposed to burn your ass, okay? When it's well distilled, it should be like this. And you notice that it's not just cool on the tip of your tongue. Now it's coating on your lips. Now it's starting to get a little waxy.
Double gum now, spearmint gum going right there, you know?
And now it's coating here, and it's getting waxy here, and it's kind of getting lanolin-like.
Yeah, you feel that?
A really well-distilled spirit will coat your mouth like this and completely cool down. Does everybody have the evil drip of salivation coming down the back of their mouth right now?
Immediate.
Do you feel that thing? What is that? Acid, right?
Yeah.
Acid attacks the most vulnerable part in your mouth, which is way back here in the back of your tongue. Okay, that's where the sour part goes. And acidity is one of the key components of a balanced spirit. So not only is this spirit dry and clean, but it's very balanced in that it's got high acidity. It provides clearness. Now, I said before, sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, astringency. When we say that we measure these things with the taste buds on our tongue, the other things that we measure texturally, light, rich, full body, delicate, soft, velvety, and very, very personal. Length of finish, complexity. When I said the 6 flavors, Astringency is when all of those other flavors are in perfect harmony and they leave your mouth this way, feeling clean and ready to eat or drink, which is the objective. The purpose of the cocktail from the beginning was not to cover it up. It was to enhance it. It's to soften the edges. Before we had spirits this perfect, quite frankly, most of them were a little rougher. We had to kind of soften the edges a little bit. But the idea was to enhance the intrinsic qualities. So those flavors that you all picked out, we still want those to shine through. We have a practice tasting set up with 4 white spirits and 4 brown goods. And remember, I've been saying that this is a sensory evaluation because smelling may be the most important part, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think we can get a lot out of this particular glass. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is give it a swirl, because that's going to get a lot of the spirit up on the side of the glass where the oxygen can get to it and pull some of the aromas out of there. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a whiff. Now, it's not like wine. You know, if I just go like that, I could drop that way, because this is, you know, pure spirit. I mean, this is fairly high alcohol stuff.
We're over 90 proof.
Yeah, exactly. So when you bring a glass like this up to your nose, you really want to take it pretty easy. You don't want to take a hard sniff like you would with wine, or a lot of people do with wine. One of the things that I'll often do is let it settle a little bit and take a gentle smell, give it a swirl, take a gentle smell. And the first thing I smell on this one, I get this sort of pine needle smell, which I associate with juniper.
Absolutely.
It's like black pepper, it's like pine needle. It has that fresh forest smell, which again, I associate with juniper. I think I know what category we're in here, okay? I mean, you know.
You think this might be a gin?
I think it better be a gin, because it certainly smells like juniper berries. And that's what gin is supposed to smell like.
Juniper berries grow on evergreen bushes, and you get this piney scent, and you get this tarry, resiny feeling on your fingers. And quality of distillation,
yes.
Can we talk about that?
Serious quality of distillation issues. When I smell this, I smell juniper, I smell pine, I smell black pepper, so I smell spices first. But immediately my mind is drawn to fruit. I get lemon rind, maybe a little bit of orange rind, maybe some grapefruit rind. And to me, that indicates almost immediately that I'm dealing with a high-quality spirit, because I'm not just going, whoa, alcohol. And I often will smell, poorly made spirits will have a very hot, it'll be peppery, but peppery in a painful way, like literally painful on my nose or making my eyes water or things like that. This does nothing of the sort. Instead, I'm all caught up in the smell of juniper, smell of fruit rind, which is a good sign to me. But I look at things in categories. I want to smell spices. I want to smell fruits. I may want to smell, I don't know, things from the earth. I may want to smell things from nature like vegetables or things like that. Different herbs. I'm going to look for different things like that. So let's go to herbs next on this one.
Yeah, definitely herbal in here.
Yeah.
Just a hint, just a touch.
Yeah, it's like fresh rosemary. I mean, really fresh rosemary, and maybe some basil, maybe some mint, maybe some thyme, things like that. It's hard to put a name on them. What you do is you get fresh herbs. Okay, so I got a lot of spice. I've got plenty of juniper. I've got nice fruit, but tart fruit, and then I have plenty of spice. And what I don't have is alcohol that hurts my nose or makes my eyes water. So thus far, the indications are really good on this thing.
Well, and if the spirit is well distilled, it will do exactly what the spirit is doing in the glass. The spirit itself provides a platform, if you will, and it pushes all of these aromatics forward. So we don't really, of course you get alcohol in this glass, it's 90 proof, but it's not, like you say, it's not burning you, it's not sweet, it's not noticeable, because the alcohol is pushing all of the aromatics forward so that we get these lovely smells. I was going to add that I pick up a little bit of licorice or some sort of anise smell in there, just a hint, just a touch
licorice,
of that in the back.
And now I'm adding a little orange, a little lime, and so again, I feel really good about the quality of distillation in here, that they didn't leave a lot of heads in here or a lot of tails, which is the part of the distillation that can smell pretty rough on the nose. But the only way I can be sure about this is by tasting it. With wine, I can make my mind up a lot in the nose. With spirits, I think you really do have to get it in your mouth, even if you're spitting. I always insist that people are spitting. We're spitting. You need to spit. Yeah, you gotta. You know, you're trying to get through the shift. Don't do this to yourself. Spit and be a good bartender. But I think it's very important for us to taste it to be sure that the quality of the distillate is as good as it smells.
Well, and you're absolutely right. With wine, we get a lot more in the nose. With spirits, we really rely upon our mouth. So what we're going to do first is you're going to take just a little sip of this, and you're going to put it in your mouth and just rinse your mouth out. Like mouthwash without gargling. Just rinse your mouth out and spit it out. Let's go ahead and do that now.
My mouth is minty fresh, but I'm going to take a second taste now, because I've prepared my mouth, just like Steve said, Now it's time to take a second taste. Can we go with
Well,
that?
when we do the second taste, let's make sure we do it the right way the first time. And how you do this moving forward is going to be a very personal thing. But what we find is that, well, the tip of the tongue is where we taste sweetness. And as you know from earlier in this module, alcohol comes from sugar. So fascinatingly enough, our first notice of alcohol in the mouth is, of course, at the tip of the tongue. So if you want to really break down the spirit without having the abusive, abrasive blast of alcohol, what you do is you move it past the tip of your tongue. So what I'd suggest that you do is, once you've rinsed your mouth the first time and just cleaned it out, now you're going to take a little sip, and this time put it in the middle of your tongue. Move it past the tip of your tongue. Then let it fall off the sides of your tongue, and literally move it all around in your mouth gently. Coat your lips, coat your gums, your teeth, your entire mouth. And now what I want you to do is hold it in your mouth with your lips closed and create a vacuum in there. We talked about the soft palate before, and we talked about breathing in and smelling. Well, we, for years, have been tasting food by breathing out. So this will make it much easier for you. While the spirit's in your mouth, with your lips closed, breathe out through your nose, and then we're going to spit it out, and then we'll break it down and maybe show them a couple of the more tricks. So
that
second taste now.
Shall we?
And what we often do is we evaluate the base spirit straight and room temperature. But then perhaps afterwards, to increase the aromatics, then maybe we add a drop of water and dilute it a little bit and check it out. But first we have to know, how good is that distillation? What is the quality level of our base distillate? And that's what we're going to break down right now. So second taste. Let's do it.
There we go. You get the idea. You got to swish it around, move it around, breathe out. Think about it. Orange, sweet lemon, sweet lime, like kaffir lime, Meyer lemon.
No mistaking the juniper, though.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, now I've gone to the black pepper. Now I've gotten to the that herbal, juniper, peppery note, pine note.
Let's do
a trick.
All right, here's what we're going to do. This may be the single most important thing we can share with you, and this is the opportunity to measure the quality of distillate. Right now, you could stop here. There's no burn, and yet, sometimes with spirits, they'll change. So what we're going to do is we're going to literally just purse our lips and breathe in through our mouth and out through our nose. Everybody ready? Breathe in. Now out. Through your nose, notice how the aromatics begin to light up. Do it a couple of times.
Now my orange is getting drier. My orange is really getting drier.
Now,
it's all orange zest, lime zest, all that sweet stuff I had before, totally gone. Now peppery, almost dusty even, dried herbs.
I think it's very important to point out the difference between the spice burn, because on your tongue you get some of that spiciness, but it's not an alcohol burn. Alcohol is going to catch you here.
And make your eyes water.
Yeah, around in here. Everyone gets it in a different place, but you'll know it.
Yeah.
Alcohol burns you here, whereas this is spice. And spice is a different kind of a heat.
Ginger.
You'll never...
Ginger.
Good
ginger.
call,
Black pepper, ginger,
white
lemon.
pepper heat.
White pepper heat, yeah, exactly.
And
herbs, dried herbs.
The herbal thing is much stronger now. Maybe like coriander, cardamom, that sort of Asian herbal spice.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is a gin.
Oh, you're good.
Thank you.
You are so good.
And what I do think that's going on is that the way it sits in the mouth right now, my mouth is very dry.
Fair.
And that's really important in my evaluation of the quality of the spirit. There are spirits that have glycerin added to them, sugar added to them, various things, and I'm not saying those spirits are all bad. It's just that that's a fairly cheap and easy way to try to make a so-so spirit taste a little better. But what happens in a spirit like this is my mouth is very dry. It's like the Sahara in there right now, and that tells me nobody cheated in that way. They didn't add anything here trying to cover up what they thought was, well, an okay spirit. Instead, my mouth is bone dry, it's dusty, peppery, there's like a caramel note now. It's really an attractive sort of...
Can we talk about the salivation and how much acidity is contributing to the dryness right now? I mean, honestly, you have the evil drip of saliva coming down the back of your mouth. This acidity, if you will, is one of the key elements for matching spirits and cocktails with food. And it's a very, very important point to talk about. And the other thing I'd like to just point out is we talked earlier, sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, and astringency. The astringency thing I tried to describe as the Japanese sake tasting model is this. It's this cleanliness in your mouth.
Everything cleanliness.
The everything, where now I'm left with a clean mouth, ready to eat and ready to drink. And speaking of drinking, what do you say let's break down one brown spirit, too, just so we can see the difference?
I think that's good. Now, you remember on glass number 1, I talked a little bit about the caramel note, and I want to explain that because we're going to run into caramel in these brown goods. I think the caramel in glass number 1 is like toasted grain. There's a sweet sort of toasted grain, and so I guess the moral of the story to me is even in these white spirits, you can figure out what it's made from. But let's go to this.
Well, and before we go, I think we just need to go back for what about the length? What about the complexity, the layers of different flavors going on in the mouth? Something you always want to reflect on before you move on is how long is that spirit? How complex is that spirit? How well distilled is that spirit? And I think in this case, answers all of those questions all by itself.
At the same time, I'll admit that white spirits typically don't have as long a finish and as many bells and whistles as a spirit does that has been allowed to be aged in barrel. Like I said, we're going to pick up out of the barrel, look here and know there's going to be barrel character. I'm going to get caramel, butterscotch, honey, all sorts of wonderful things. Maybe molasses, maybe maple syrup, vanilla for sure. So all sorts of things are already going to happen just because I've aged this in barrel.
Now, that all comes from the barrel itself.
Yeah.
But what about those smells and aromatics that are attached because of the time that it's spent in a barrel, which is a slightly different way of looking at it?
It is a different thing. You get caramel, butterscotch, molasses, etc., vanilla from the barrel itself, but if you leave something in barrel and put it in an environment, let's say, where the temperature's going to get a little bit warmer and it'll expand a little bit in the barrel and maybe contract in the winter, and do this for several years, you start to get a nutty character. Almonds, pecans, walnuts, things of that nature. And then you start to get something like dried fruits, figs, raisins, dates. It can get really pretty exotic, all the way to an almost cheese-like note in some very, very old cognacs and very, very old single malt scotches. But that's kind of off the charts. So let's just see what's going on with this glass, shall we?
If you just, again, you go through the steps, as before, we're going to look at it. You'll see the tears are a little bit different. They're going to manifest themselves as heavier. It's going to seem like it has more viscosity because the other thing oak adds is a textural thing in your mouth. It adds a richness, and that's why so many people drink oak-aged spirits, because they're softer or smoother than most white spirits. The other thing is sometimes you'll pick up some tears at the bottom of the glass that are specifically from an oak barrel. But in the nose is really where this spirit's going to sing.
Yeah, the good stuff's going on in the nose.
Why don't you take us through what you get out of it?
Yeah, here we go. So first things first, vanilla. Surprise! Okay, it's been in a barrel. Good. Vanilla, caramel, touch of butterscotch. Not a lot of butterscotch. A little bit of butterscotch.
Baking spices.
Baking spices
Cinnamon,
for sure.
cloves.
But the molasses maple thing, no, we're not all the way to the molasses maple, even chocolatey thing. It isn't really going on here so much. Instead, as Steve said, we're getting immediately to spices. So baking spices, clove, nutmeg, allspice, cinnamon.
Maybe a little of that nuttiness you're talking about, though, in kind of a roasted cashew kind of note, if you will.
Yeah, there's some almond. There's some like almond extract to this as well. Now, what that's teaching us is it's been in barrel, and it's been in barrel for at least a while.
A while.
And we've got to figure out the fruits in here. Now, I know it sounds crazy. We're talking about fruits. We're talking about something made from grain, but in truth, grain has fruity notes as well that come through the fermentation. Think about your beer. Beer is made from grain, and yet we'll talk about the fruity notes, or at least beer writers will talk about the fruity notes that you find in a beer. So what kind of fruit notes do you get?
Pear candy, apples, the little green apple
pear,
skin,
apple, lemon, maybe.
There's definitely citrus. To me, it's a little bit sweeter, a little more like an orange rind, if you will. But it's rind. I mean, there's definitely the bitter, sour thing working together. Now, a lot of fruit.
Yeah, I talked before that I didn't really think there was much in the way of the chocolate here, but the more I smell it, the more I get almost like white chocolate to this thing. It's like a very mild.
Light.
Yeah, it's something in there with my almond extract. I know this sounds really crazy, and we're going off on the deep end, but the truth is, if you just keep smelling this stuff and keep working it, you can find lots of little aromas in there. When you do so with friends, some people are going to go, I do not know what you're talking about, dude. And some people are going to say, yeah, I totally get that. Think of it as a collaborative project. Not everybody's going to smell the same things. Not everybody's going to get the same things. The best thing you can do is listen to your customers, listen to your colleagues. When they come up with a good descriptor, see if you can find it. And accept there are smells we don't get. Some of us smell some things better than others. It's just it's human nature. That's why you end up preferring some foods over others. So don't worry about it. Just figure out what sort of smells you're good at getting and then trust yourself on those totally.
Speaking of other smells, I've got to mention.
Yeah, please.
There's a little smokiness going on in here.
Yeah, there is, isn't there?
That I might associate with a peat fire, perhaps.
It's salty.
It's salty. Brine, oyster, seaside. Just a hint. Not a lot of it. And just a very mild herbal quality.
Oh, definitely. I think there's some herbal stuff in here.
Not dill, but going that direction almost.
Yeah, again, kind of the smell of the forest, all sorts of interesting smells.
Clover.
That clover for sure.
Sage.
There's something floral going on here that I'm not really sure how to define, but floral, I'm going to define it like that. So there's a ton of things
Heather?
happening. Yeah, it could be
Heather?
Could be heather plants, which smell kind of peppery and floral at the same time. I'm not saying you're supposed to smell all those things in this glass, but if you spend enough time, I think you can.
They're all there.
Yeah, and the issue is that this is a very complex nose. On the other hand, I think one of the important things to say about this glass is none of them really stick out. It's not like there's one smell that dominates everything else, whereas glass number 1, frankly, was dominated by a juniper smell and then a fruit smell. This has a lot more notes, and yet none of them seem to stick out.
So I think it's time to taste.
I mean, okay, 2 tastes, right? First taste, just to rinse, spit out like this, okay? Mm-hmm. Next. Okay, let's talk. Let's talk. Soft, round, vanilla right off the bat, almost buttery texture to it, like buttered almonds, whatever those are. Creamy, yeah, exactly. Creamy, green pear, cooked pear, green apple, cooked apple, both. Little orange, toasted grain, almost coconutty. Oh, yeah, you're right. Well, let's cool off.
Huge
Let's cool
spice.
off.
Okay, everybody, cool. And remember, breathe in through your lips and out through your nose.
It's like toasted grain.
Yeah, very much. Very grainy, very malty,
yeah.
if you will.
Yeah.
You can actually taste the malted barley in
Licorice
there.
is showing up now, too.
A lot of it, yeah. And the earthiness, the rich, earthy, very chocolatey, much more so in the mouth than in the nose.
Almost walnut now, so it obviously had thyme and oak because that walnut note, and there's now kind of a fig note that's rolling around, that had to come from thyme and oak. I get a peppery note, I get the floral note showing up now, so it must be around some flowers or heather or something like that, yeah?
And now we can add saltiness to our spectrum of textures.
Yeah, somebody just did the salt all over my tongue.
And you feel it, in that spot right up here on the sides of your tongue, right behind the tip, where it's, you've got another kind of frothy, bubbling salivation there from just that hint of brine.
Oh, and my mouth
just a little bit of seaside.
My mouth is really dry too, so it's not just the salt drying it out; it's also the citrus, it's the green apple, the green. Yeah.
Perhaps the cool climate of Scotland, whatever, but it's got a very high perception of acidity in the mouth.
Yeah, indeed.
But now, what about what the oak adds? Oak adds
Caramel,
so much texture,
vanilla,
so much
creamy,
richness.
Butterscotch.
All of those words tell me, richness, creaminess in my mouth. And then, how you measure length of finish and complexity is such a personal thing. Well, I think it's time to taste.
Oh, I'm in, but you got to do 2 tastes, right? First taste is to swish it around, spit it out. Second taste, first taste like this. Second taste.
And take your time with that second taste. Really work it around in your mouth.
Vanilla, marshmallow, something like that. Spice, but I'm immediately getting vanilla, caramel, butterscotch, kind of the barrel notes. And then I'm getting that spice. I mean, pepper, cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, all on my tongue. It's really going like that right now on my tongue. Now I'm getting dried out from green apple, green pear, cooked pear, a little bit of orange, a little bit of lemon at my mouth. Wait, my mouth's getting really, really dry.
Let's breathe. Let's breathe. Ready? Breathe in through your mouth and out through your nose 2 times, very softly, very gently. Let's measure the quality of distillation here.
Oh, wow. Toasted nuts.
It's a great distillate.
It's like toasted nuts. It's like toasted bread right now, too. And it really has kind of that sweet, there's honey on my bread.
But you can taste the malted barley, can't you?
I mean,
you
toasted nuts, toasted
you know
grains.
where you are and what kind of whiskey you're in. And now you get a little bit of that, well, it's very, very high acid. Maybe that cool climate of Scotland
apple,
working into that.
Yeah, it's getting really dry in my mouth.
Orange
right
peel
now.
thing.
Yeah, and it's not just from the grain, it's from a good distillate. Somebody skillfully cut heads and tails. Now I get licorice, now I get mint, now I get herbal notes, now I get a floral note, so maybe that heather thing is legit.
Well, and let's talk about the other thing that's legit, and that's the brininess. You get that little tiny bit of saltiness
it's getting salty
right up here
now.
on the sides of your tongue. You get a
get
little
it?
frothy,
Seriously,
bubbling salivation. And it's very minimal, but it's there.
Saltiness there.
So there's salt and there's sour. There's a bit of sweetness from the oak. And look at what the oak adds texturally.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how
it's
you
creamy,
measure... Oh, very
buttery.
much so.
It's
full in the
almond
mouth.
extract. It's amazing. It's really got all those different things going on. So
and those are all textural.
Oh, yeah.
Those are all things I feel in my mouth.
And we'd have to say it's complex. And
you think?
Exactly as we saw on the nose, none of these pieces really stick out, although I do get kind of a finish of toasted nuts and butterscotch. So I'm guessing there's plenty of barrel on here and plenty of thyme in barrel on here. Otherwise, we wouldn't really end up with that almost, there's even a figgy note right now, a little date, little fig.
little dried fruit.
A lot of stuff going on.
Well, and you know, the finish to me is a very, very long finish to add to your complexity statement. And I would just say how we measure finish is a very personal, very subjective kind of thing. And most people will think that white spirits have a lesser finish, a shorter finish, if you will, than an oak-aged spirit. But that's because you're measuring the impact of the oak in the mouth. I tend to go towards measuring the impact of the alcohol and the quality of distillation. But regardless, you have two spirits as examples that we started with here that should give you a good kickoff. Finish is a very personal, very subjective thing, and how you measure that length of finish, whether you're measuring the impact of the oak or whether you're measuring the impact of the spirit itself and the quality of distillation, is your decision. The key is, I think we've had two excellent examples to start you off, to kick off your tasting. And what we urge you to do is taste, 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 taste more, practice tasting, and then remember the one missing element, and that is memory. Sensory memory, trying to remember every single element, not the way we described it to you, but rather what you're getting, how the spirit evolves, how it changes, the flavors, the textures, and remember them as a sensory memory that you can go back to, that you can pull out of your library and say, I've had that gin before, I've had that whiskey before, I know what country I'm in. And this is the beginning, the platform, realizing that most of you out there are already really good tasters. We're just hoping some of these techniques will take you to an even higher place, and then practice and memory will take you where you need to be a truly great taster.